Survivors, we're all searching for a sanctuary, a place where the infected can't reach us, where hunger doesn't gnaw at our bellies and where we can finally sleep without fear. But not every safe zone is what it claims to be. Some are sanctuaries, true havens of hope, built by people clinging to the last shreds of humanity. Others are traps, deadly traps, and the difference between the two, it could mean your life or your death. There's something about the word sanctuary that stirs something deep within us, a safe zone, a bastion against the chaos. It's the promise of warmth, food, and safety, a chance to feel human again. After all, isn't that what we're all fighting for, a place where children can laugh again, where the sound of birds replaces the distant groans of the infected, where we can rebuild what we've lost. That dream is powerful, intoxicating even, but it's also dangerous, because in this world, dreams can blind you to the truth. There are places out there, rare but real, that offer genuine safety. I've heard whispers of such sanctuaries, and the stories fill me with both hope and caution. There's the tale of Haven's Peak, a fortified settlement built into the cliffs of a remote mountain range. Survivors say its walls are impenetrable and its people have created a self-sustaining community, with crops, clean water, and even electricity. Entry isn't easy, they vet every newcomer with intense scrutiny to prevent infected infiltrators, but once you're in, you're family. Then there's the story of the Iron Dome, a military installation turned survivor outpost. It's said to be run by an ex-military commander who defected after the Red Horizon bombings. With a combination of military discipline and compassion, they've turned the facility into a beacon of hope for those lucky enough to find it. These sanctuaries exist, they're proof that humanity can endure, even thrive, in the face of unimaginable horror. But for every true sanctuary, there are a dozen places that offer nothing but false hope. Let me tell you about the other side of the coin. There was a story about a place called Paradise Valley. Survivors flocked there after hearing its promises of safety and endless resources. When they arrived, they found walls, guards, and even a functioning farm. It looked like heaven, but Paradise Valley had a dark secret. The guards weren't protecting the survivors, they were controlling them. Those who couldn't work were escorted to the outskirts, never to be seen again. Some survivors claim they saw the guards feeding those people to the infected, keeping the pee away from the main gates. Another infamous tale is the story of the Lighthouse Refuge, perched on the edge of a crumbling seaside cliff. It was advertised as an unassailable haven. What the refugees didn't know was that the infected had already reached the underground tunnels below the cliffs. One night, as everyone slept, the infected swarmed the settlement, leaving no survivors. And then there's the story of the Glass Tower, a high rise in the heart of a decimated city. Survivors thought the height would keep them safe, but they underestimated the infected's persistence and the desperation of other humans. Raiders scaled the tower, killing anyone in their path and using the survivors as bait to lure the infected away. Those who managed to escape did so only to warn others of the horrors they witnessed. Not every trap is as obvious as a raider-infested tower or a camp run by tyrants. Some traps are more subtle, designed to lure in the desperate and unsuspecting. When you hear about a sanctuary, ask yourself, who is running it? Is it a community of survivors banding together, or is there a leader demanding absolute loyalty? Be wary of anyone who asks too many questions about what you can offer before you've even seen the place. How do they keep the infected out? Walls, weapons, location, every sanctuary needs a strategy. If they're vague or evasive about their defenses, it's a red flag. What's the cost of entry? Some sanctuaries demand payment, food, weapons, or even people. Be cautious if the price seems too high, it might be better to walk away. What's their history? Talk to others who've been there. Survivors often share stories, and if a place has a bad reputation, word will get around. I've heard from survivors who thought they were walking into a sanctuary but found only death. One man, Ian, told me about a time he followed a group promising safety in a hidden valley. When he arrived, he realized too late it was a trap set by raiders. They stripped him of everything, his supplies, his dignity, his hope. He escaped only because the infected showed up and gave him a chance to run. Then there's Lila, a young woman who sought refuge in an old hospital that claimed to be a sanctuary. She thought the locked doors would keep her safe, but the infected were already inside, lurking in the shadows. By the time she realized it, it was too late for everyone else. These aren't just cautionary tales, they're reminders. The world is as dangerous as it is desperate. Not everyone who promises safety is a savior. Survivors, if you're considering heading to a sanctuary, remember these rules. Scout first, never approach blindly. Observe from a distance, learn their routines and look for signs of danger. Trust your instincts, if something feels off, it probably is. Don't let desperation cloud your judgment. Have an exit plan, always know how you'll get out if things go south. Never rely on the promise of safety alone. If a sanctuary is real, you'll find what you need there. If it's a trap, carrying too much will slow you down. Never go alone, there's strength in numbers. Even one trusted companion can make all the difference. And finally, survivors, remember this, the most important sanctuary is the one you build for yourself, whether it's a fortified cabin, an underground bunker, or just a group of people you trust with your life. Your safety is your responsibility. The world may be broken, but we don't have to be. Hope is a powerful thing, but it's also a dangerous one. Use it wisely, because in this world, not every sanctuary is what it seems. Be careful out there, and as always, keep your radios on. They came for us when we least expected it. We called them the Hunters, and if the infected weren't terrifying enough already, these things brought a new nightmare to our world. Survivors, if you're out there listening, I need you to understand one thing: the Hunters are not your average infected. They are faster, smarter, and far more dangerous. Tonight, I'll tell you what we know, what we fear, and what we suspect about these predators lurking in the shadows. At first, we thought they were just another stage of infection, an evolution of the virus, but the truth, while the truth might be much darker. The first reports came from the outskirts of the forgotten town, where survivors spoke of infected moving with unnatural speed and precision. These weren't the shambling corpses we'd grown used to, they were calculated, deliberate, and terrifyingly efficient. One survivor, Marcus, described his encounter in chilling detail. He was scavenging an old grocery store when he heard what he thought was a faint growl. He turned, expecting to see one of the usual infected. Instead, he saw something crouched low to the ground, its eyes locked onto him like a predator sizing up its prey. Before he could react, it lunged, crossing the aisle in seconds. Marcus barely escaped, but not before seeing the raw, animalistic hunger in its eyes. These aren't mindless creatures, they hunt, they adapt, and they seem to enjoy the chase. Let me paint a picture of what we're dealing with here. Hunters are leaner than the average infected, their muscles taut like coiled springs. Their movements are disturbingly fluid, almost human-like, but with an unnatural edge, like something out of a predator's playbook. They're faster than you, faster than anyone I've ever seen, and they're quiet, so quiet that survivors often don't realize they're being stalked until it's too late. Hunters are known to move in bursts, darting from shadow to shadow, closing the distance between them and their prey in moments. What's worse is their intelligence. Hunters have been observed working together, herding survivors into dead ends or laying in wait for the perfect moment to strike. I've even heard stories of them using basic tools, rocks, sticks, anything they can get their hands on to break down barriers or distract their prey. And their eyes, survivors describe them as glowing faintly in the dark, a haunting red hue that pierces through the night. If you see those eyes, it's already too late. How did the Hunters come to be? That's the question that keeps me awake at night. Some believe they're just a natural progression of the virus, a horrifying next step in its evolution. If that's true, then the virus is far more adaptive and dangerous than we ever imagined. But others, myself included, suspect that the hunters weren't a natural occurrence at all. The precision, the intelligence, the way they seem almost engineered, it all points back to Gen X dynamics. We know from leaked documents and survivor accounts that Gen X was experimenting with enhancing human capabilities before the outbreak. Soldiers who could run faster, fight harder, and think quicker. Is it so hard to believe that the virus might have amplified those traits in some of its hosts, or worse, that these creatures were intentionally created as part of Gen X's experiments? Think about it, a weaponized infected that can outthink and outrun any opponent. If Gen X was behind this, then they've unleashed something far worse than they ever intended. The stories of those who survived encounters with hunters are the stuff of nightmares. Take Emily, for example. She was hiding in an abandoned school with a small group of survivors. They thought they were safe behind the locked doors, but then they heard it, a faint tapping, almost like fingernails on glass. It was a hunter, testing the windows, looking for a weakness. When it found one, it didn't smash through like a regular infected, it slipped inside silently, taking out 2 people before anyone even realized it was there. Then there's Daniel, who tried to outrun a hunter in the woods. He said it toyed with him, letting him think he was getting away before cutting him off again and again. By the time he made it back to his group, he was so rattled he could barely speak. He survived, but the others weren't so lucky. These aren't isolated incidents, they're happening more and more frequently, and each time, the hunters seem to get smarter, more coordinated. So what do you do if you find yourself face to face with a hunter? The truth is your odds aren't great, but there are a few things you can try. Avoid the shadows, hunters thrive in darkness. Stick to well-lit areas if you can and avoid places where they can easily hide or ambush you. Stay quiet, they hunt by sound as much as sight. If you hear one nearby, freeze, don't move unless you absolutely have to. Aim for the head, hunters are faster and tougher than regular infected, but a shot to the head will still take them down, just make sure you don't miss. Don't go alone, hunters are less likely to attack larger groups, there's strength in numbers, even against these monsters. Set traps, if you know a hunter is stalking you, use it against them. Trip wires, noise distractions, anything that can slow them down or give you an opening to escape. And most importantly, if you see those glowing red eyes in the darkness, run as fast as you can. Here's the most unsettling question of all, what do the hunters want? The infected are driven by primal hunger, but the hunters, they're different. They don't just kill to feed. Survivors have reported seeing hunters watching them from a distance, as if studying them. Some even claim the creatures seem to recognize them, targeting specific individuals in their group. It's almost as if they have a purpose, a goal beyond simple survival. Are they hunting us for sport, or are they following some kind of instinct, something buried deep within the virus or their creators? Survivors, the hunters are out there, they're faster, smarter and more dangerous than anything we've faced before, and they're not going away. We need to learn everything we can about them, because ignorance will get us killed. Stay vigilant, stay prepared, and remember, the moment you let your guard down is the moment they strike. Survivors, we've talked about the hunters tonight, the apex predators of this infected world, but as you've been listening, I know what some of you are probably wondering, what about the wardens? Are they the same as the hunters? Are these two nightmares somehow connected? And if they're not, what exactly makes the warden so different? Well, buckle up because this rabbit hole goes deeper than I ever imagined. Tonight, we're not just talking about the hunters, we're diving into the truth, or at least what I think is the truth, about the wardens. To answer the burning question first, no, the wardens and the hunters are not the same. Yes, they're both terrifying, yes, they're both deadly, and yes, they've both turned this world into an unrelenting nightmare, but when you dig into their characteristics, their behaviors, and their possible origins, the differences between them become stark. Let's break it down. The hunters are pure predators, designed or evolved for the hunt. They're fast, intelligent, and terrifyingly efficient. Their goal is clear: to stalk, chase, and kill. The Wardens, on the other hand, are something else entirely. They're not here to hunt us down like the hunters do, they're here to control us, or whatever remains of us. Think of them as the enforcers of this new twisted world order. Wardens are larger than the hunters, almost grotesquely so, with bodies that look more like patchwork monstrosities than anything human. Their movements are slower, but deliberate, as though every step they take serves a purpose. They carry with them an aura of authority, a presence that freezes survivors in their tracks. And here's the most chilling part: while the hunters are largely silent, the Wardens, they speak, not in full sentences or coherent thoughts, but in broken, guttural phrases that mimic human speech. Survivors have reported hearing them say words like return, control, or even their names of survivors the Wardens somehow seem to know, to understand. To understand the Wardens, we have to go back to the early days of the Outbreak, back when Gen X Dynamics was still playing God in their underground labs. Remember, Gen X wasn't just trying to create a super soldier or cure disease, they were trying to reshape humanity itself. Part of their research focused on controlling the infected, turning them into tools or weapons that could be deployed at will. The Wardens, it seems, were one of their experiments. Survivors who've scavenged old Gen X facilities have found bits and pieces of documentation, enough to piece together a grim picture. The Wardens were designed as a form of crowd control, engineered to subdue or manage large groups of infected or even survivors. But as with everything Gen X touched, the experiment spiraled out of control. The Wardens broke free, and whatever programming or instincts they were given twisted into something far darker. Now, they roam the wasteland, enforcing a set of rules that no one understands and punishing anyone who dares defy them. I've heard enough stories about the Wardens to fill a dozen broadcasts, and every single one sends shivers down my spine. One survivor, Claire, told me about a group she was traveling with near what used to be Denver. They stumbled upon a field littered with bodies, all of them arranged in a perfect circle. In the center stood a Warden, motionless, as if it were standing guard. Claire and her group tried to sneak past, but the Warden turned its head slowly, deliberately, and let out a low, guttural growl that was enough to send them running. But Claire swears she heard it say something as they fled. Then there's the story of a man named Victor who claimed to have been taken by the Wardens. He said they dragged him to an old Gen X facility, where he saw others, humans, being experimented on. Victor managed to escape, but not before he heard one of the Wardens speak. It said, "You are not ready." And finally, there's the tale of the Sanctuary Massacre. You remember Sanctuary, don't you? That so-called safe zone that turned out to be a death trap. Survivors from that night reported seeing Wardens among the horde, but they weren't attacking, they were directing the infected, guiding them like shepherds guiding sheep. It was the Wardens who opened the gates, who ensured no one got out alive. So how do the Wardens and the Hunters fit together? This is where things get murky, survivors. Some believe the Wardens are an advanced form of the Hunters, a further stage of the virus's evolution. Others think the two are entirely separate creations of Gen X Dynamics, designed for different purposes. There's even a theory that the Wardens control the Hunters, using them as their enforcers. Think about it, the Hunters' intelligence, their coordination, it could all be the result of the Wardens' influence. But here's the kicker, there are survivors who claim to have seen Wardens and Hunters in the same place, and the two seemed at odds, as if they were competing for dominance. If that's true, then whatever Gen X unleashed isn't just a threat to us, it's a threat to itself. Surviving a Warden encounter is a whole different ballgame than surviving a Hunter. Don't draw attention, Wardens seem to operate on a set of rules, and if you stay out of their way, they might ignore you. Avoid eye contact. Survivors have reported that making direct eye contact with a warden seems to trigger aggression. Keep your head down and move slowly. Don't fight. Unlike hunters, wardens are incredibly tough to take down. Bullets barely faze them and close combat is a death sentence. Listen to their words. As strange as it sounds, the warden's broken speech might give you clues about their intentions or how to escape. But let's be honest, survivors, if you see a warden, your best bet is to run and pray it doesn't follow. Here's what keeps me up at night. Survivors, the wardens, and the hunters are just pieces of a much larger puzzle. What was Gen X trying to achieve with these creations, and more importantly, what happens if they succeed? Every story we uncover, every clue we piece together brings us closer to the truth, but the more I learn, the more I realize how little we truly understand. So stay vigilant, stay alive, and keep listening, because in a world like this, knowledge isn't just power, it's survival. Survivors, if you've encountered the wardens or the hunters, I want to hear your stories. Leave your mark, share your tale. Let's piece this puzzle together before it's too late. Tonight, I'm diving deep into the unholy triangle that ties together the wardens, the hunters, and the masterminds behind it all, Gen X dynamics. These aren't just separate pieces of a nightmare puzzle, they're threads in a tapestry of horror, woven together with intention, cruelty, and dare I say, brilliance. For those of you just tuning in, the wardens are the enforcers, the controllers with their ominous presence and chilling utterances of human-like speech. The hunters are the predators, the stalkers, the ultimate killing machines born from this viral nightmare. And Gen X dynamics, they're the ones who lit the fuse that started this apocalypse. So how are they all connected? What ties these monstrosities together? Let me take you on a journey into the very heart of this darkness. Before the world collapsed, Gen X dynamics was heralded as the future of biotechnology. Their research spanned everything from curing rare diseases to creating enhancements for human capabilities, at least that's what their brochure said. Behind the scenes, they were playing with fire, experimenting with genetic manipulation and viral weaponization. The initial goal, from what I've pieced together from survivors who scavenged Gen X labs, was twofold. They wanted a biological entity that could enforce order in war zones or pandemics, one that didn't require human oversight or ethical considerations. Predatory supremacy with the hunters, these were meant to be weapons, silent, deadly and unstoppable, the ultimate soldiers that needed no food, no rest, and felt no fear. But as we all know, when you tamper with nature, it's only a matter of time before it rebels. It's unclear whether the wardens and hunters were developed simultaneously or if one led to the other. Some evidence suggests the wardens were Gen X's first foray into viral control. When that didn't work as planned, they shifted their focus to creating the hunters. And here's the kicker, the virus that birthed both the wardens and hunters, it wasn't originally meant to spread to civilians. Gen X was experimenting with delivery systems, airborne, waterborne, even skin contact, but someone, somewhere, lost control, or maybe they let it loose intentionally, we may never know. From everything I've gathered, the wardens were supposed to be the shepherds of the infected, not their own distinct species. Early prototypes were injected with modified versions of the virus, designed to increase cognitive function while maintaining a degree of humanity. The goal was to create overseers who could manage infected populations, keep them contained and enforce Gen X's will. But something went horribly wrong. The wardens began developing traits Gen X didn't anticipate or didn't want to admit to. Their speech, while broken, showed signs of independent thought. Their behavior became erratic, sometimes protective, other times violently aggressive. It's as if the virus inside them was evolving, pushing them towards something beyond what Gen X had envisioned. Now, survivors tell stories of wardens behaving in ways that almost seem purposeful. They don't just wander aimlessly like the infected masses they control. They guard, they even seem to recognize specific individuals. What's most unsettling is the possibility that the wardens are still carrying out some fragment of their original programming. Are they protecting something Gen X left behind, or are they enforcing a set of rules that only they understand? Whatever the case, the Wardens stand apart from the rest of the infected, as if there's something more, something worse. While the Wardens were designed to control, the Hunters were designed to destroy. But here's where things get complicated. Hunters didn't show up until months into the outbreak. For a long time, survivors thought they were just an evolution of the virus, a natural progression as the infection adapted to its environment. But now I'm not so sure. Some survivors claim to have found evidence suggesting the Hunters were a deliberate creation by Gen X, a separate branch of their experiments. Unlike the Wardens, who were given heightened cognitive abilities, the Hunters were stripped down to their most primal instincts. They were engineered for one purpose, the hunt. But why would Gen X create two such different entities? The answer might lie in their ultimate goal. The Wardens were meant to control humanity, the Hunters were meant to eliminate threats. Together, they form a terrifying balance of power, one that leaves no room for freedom or resistance. So here's the million-dollar question: are the Wardens and Hunters connected, or are they entirely separate monsters in this apocalypse? From what I've gathered, there's evidence to support both theories. The Unity theory: some survivors believe the Wardens and Hunters are part of the same hierarchy. The Wardens act as the commanders, using their eerie presence and broken speech to direct the Hunters. This would explain why the Hunters sometimes display a level of coordination that seems almost too intelligent for mindless predators. The rivalry theory: others believe the Wardens and Hunters are at odds, representing two competing factions of the virus. The Wardens, with their controlling nature, seem to want order, even if it's a twisted, horrific version of it. The Hunters, meanwhile, thrive on chaos, embodying the virus's most destructive instincts. Personally, I lean toward the first theory. Too many stories suggest the Hunters and Wardens work in tandem, albeit in a way that's hard to decipher. But who knows, maybe the truth is even stranger than we can imagine. There are countless stories from survivors who've encountered both Wardens and Hunters, and each one adds a new piece to the puzzle. One group of survivors in the Midwest reported seeing a Warden standing atop a hill, flanked by a pack of Hunters. The Hunters didn't attack until the Warden growled something incomprehensible. It was as if the Warden was giving them orders. Another survivor told me about a time they saw a Hunter attack a Warden. The fight was brutal, and while the Hunter managed to injure the Warden, it was ultimately torn apart. But here's the strange part: the infected in the area ignored the fight entirely, as if they were waiting to see who would come out on top. And then there's the story of the Warden's Lair, an old Gen X facility where survivors claim both Wardens and Hunters were seen patrolling together. The few who escaped said the two seem to coexist, at least for now. Survivors, the connection between the Wardens, Hunters, and Gen X is more than just a curiosity, it's a clue, a key to understanding the nightmare we're living in. If the Wardens and Hunters are working together, it means there's a larger plan at play, one that goes beyond simple survival. If they're rivals, it might mean the virus is fracturing, creating factions that could either destroy each other or evolve into something even worse. And if Gen X is still pulling the strings, well, that's a thought I don't even want to entertain. We're living in a world of monsters, but monsters don't just come from nowhere. Someone or something created them, and if we can understand how they're connected, maybe, just maybe, we can find a way to fight back. So keep your eyes open, your ears sharp, and your minds ready, because the answers are out there, buried beneath the ruins of this world, and I intend to find them. Survivors, tonight I'm taking you back to a place that's haunted my thoughts since the day I stumbled upon it, the forgotten military outpost. For those who've been with me since the start, you'll remember the journal I found there, the one that told the harrowing story of Subject Zero and detailed the early days of the outbreak. That place was a gold mine of information, but it was also a graveyard of hope. When I left the first time, I knew there was more buried within those walls, something I didn't have the courage to face back then. But I went back. I don't know if it was curiosity or stupidity, or maybe just the sense that the answers we need to survive are still out there, hidden in places like this. What I found, it's worse than I could have imagined. I returned to the outpost under the cover of night, the full moon casting long shadows over the rusted gates and crumbling buildings. The place hadn't changed much, or so I thought. The air was heavy, almost suffocating, as if the outpost itself resented my presence. Every step echoed in the silence, each creak of metal and crunch of gravel a reminder that I wasn't supposed to be there. The first time I explored this place, I stayed on the surface, offices, barracks, storage rooms, but this time, I went deeper. There's a subterranean level beneath the outpost, sealed off by thick steel doors. The journal mentioned it briefly, calling it the core. It was where the real work happened, the experiments that birthed the nightmare we're living in. It took hours to find a way inside, prying open rusted locks, navigating collapsed corridors, but eventually, I made it, and what I found down there, it felt like stepping into the mouth of the beast. The underground facility was vast, its walls lined with shattered glass and overturned equipment. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the faint hum of generators suggested that some systems were still operational. One room stood out, a containment chamber, its walls scorched and cracked as if something had tried to claw its way out. Inside, I found cryptic logs on a half-functioning terminal. These weren't your typical military reports, they were fragmented, full of jargon and redactions, but the pieces I could decipher painted a grim picture. Here's an excerpt I managed to transcribe. Day 27, Subject 14 exhibited signs of cognitive resistance, attempts to subdue mental activity through Compound Z failed, aggression levels increasing, potential for escalation uncontained. Day 42, Subject 0 remains unique, neural activity surpasses expectations, genetic markers suggest adaptability beyond control, termination protocols denied. Day 58, Specimens 22 to 30 show promising results as predators, enhanced speed and reflexes achieved, awaiting behavioral conditioning tests. Does that sound familiar, survivors? It should. Those are the hunters. The outpost was their birthplace. And Subject 0, well, he was something entirely different, something they didn't fully understand, and neither do I. But it wasn't just the logs, there were recordings too. I listened to some of them, though I wish I hadn't. The screams, the begging, the cold, detached voices of scientists talking about human beings like they were nothing more than test subjects, it was hell captured on tape. Further into the core, I found a storage room filled with crates marked with the Gen X Dynamics logo. Inside were vials of a strange liquid, one glowing faintly in the dark. Was this the virus in its pure form, a cure, or something else entirely? And then there was the cell. It wasn't like the other containment chambers, this one was pristine, almost sterile, with reinforced glass and heavy-duty locks. Inside, there were claw marks on the walls, but they weren't the erratic scratches of a mindless infected, they were deliberate, patterned, almost as if whoever or whatever was inside was trying to communicate. I couldn't shake the feeling that this cell was meant for someone or something special. Could it have been Subject Zero's prison, or perhaps one of the early wardens? Whatever the case, the cell was empty, and that's what scared me the most. If something was kept here, it's out there now. As I explored further, the connection between the wardens and hunters became clearer. One document described an experiment called Project Hierarchy. The idea was to create a chain of command within the infected. The wardens would act as leaders, capable of controlling lesser infected through pheromones and vocal cues. The hunters, on the other hand, were designed to be their enforcers, a perfect balance of intelligence and brutality. But here's the thing, the log suggested that the wardens resisted their programming, they started developing their own agendas, their own sense of purpose. And the hunters, they weren't supposed to operate independently, but they evolved beyond what Gen X intended. It's almost as if the virus itself had a mind of its own, using JX's experiments as a stepping stone to create something even more terrifying. I'm not the only one who's been to the outpost. Survivors have told me stories of strange encounters in the area, shadowy figures watching them from the tree line, guttural growls echoing in the night. One group claimed they saw a warden standing at the gates, its hollow eyes fixed on the horizon as if waiting for something. Another survivor described being hunted by a pack of infected led by a creature unlike anything they'd seen before, faster than a hunter, smarter than a warden. It's as if the outpost is a beacon, drawing these monstrosities back to where it all began. Survivors, I don't have all the answers yet, but one thing is clear, the Forgotten Outpost holds the key to understanding this apocalypse. Its secrets are buried beneath layers of fear, lies and blood, but I'm not giving up. I'll keep searching, keep digging, because the more we know, the better our chances of survival. For now, stay vigilant, avoid the outpost unless you're prepared for what you might find, and remember, the past is a dangerous thing, but it's also our greatest weapon. This is Adam Cross, signing off for now. Stay safe, stay strong, and as always, keep fighting. Good evening, survivors. Tonight we're diving into a story that blurs the lines between savior and destroyer, humanity and monstrosity, a story that begins with the first infected, Subject Zero. If you've been listening to my broadcasts, you'll know that I've mentioned Subject Zero before. He was the first human host of this virus, a man who unwittingly became both patient and experiment, condemned by forces beyond his control. But since the outbreak, he's become something more. He's not just a name in a journal or a ghost from the past. Survivors have seen him, they've felt his presence, and what they've described, well, it's not easy to put into words. Subject Zero has become a legend among survivors, a figure whispered about in the dead of night. Some describe him as a specter, gliding silently through ruined cities and desolate landscapes. Others say he's more like a force of nature, an unstoppable entity that leaves devastation in his wake. One survivor I spoke to, a man named Carter, claimed to have seen Zero on the outskirts of a small abandoned town. Carter said he was scavenging for supplies when he noticed a tall, gaunt figure standing in the middle of the street, backlit by the pale glow of the moon. He wasn't like the others, Carter told me, his movements were too controlled, too deliberate. He looked at me, Adam, he saw me, and for a moment I thought he was going to kill me, but then he just walked away. Carter swears Zero even muttered something under his breath as he passed. He couldn't make out the words, but he's convinced it was some kind of warning. Not all encounters with Subject Zero have been so benign. I've heard stories of survivors who crossed his path and didn't live to tell the tale. Groups torn apart in an instant, their camps reduced to smoldering ruins. One woman described seeing Zero tear through a horde of infected, only to turn on her group moments later. It was like he couldn't decide what he was, she said. One minute he was protecting us, the next he was the monster we were running from. And then there's the story of a young boy, barely old enough to speak, found wandering alone near the wreckage of what used to be a safe zone. The boy didn't say much, but he kept repeating one word over and over, Elijah. That name haunted me, survivors. Before he became Subject Zero, he was Elijah Carr, a brilliant scientist, a man with a family, a man who believed he was saving the world. Could it be that some fragment of Elijah still exists within the creature he's become, or is it just the delusions of those desperate to believe there's still hope? If Zero does retain fragments of his humanity, it raises a critical question: could he hold the key to reversing this nightmare? The journal I found at the outpost hinted at his unique biology, describing how his body adapted to the virus in ways no one else's could. Unlike the mindless infected or even the cunning hunters, Zero is something entirely different, a hybrid of man and monster, intelligence and instinct. But if we're pinning our hopes on him, we're walking a dangerous line. The same traits that make him a potential savior also make him the ultimate threat. He's stronger, faster and smarter than anything Gen X ever created. And as far as I can tell, he's not bound by the virus's usual limitations. The question isn't just whether we can find him, it's whether we should. Survivors, Subject Zero's journey has left a trail of tragedy in its wake. There's a town in the Midwest, what's left of it anyway, that serves as a grim testament to what happens when Zero loses control. The place was called Rosewood, a quiet community that managed to hold out longer than most. They had walls, supplies, and a strong sense of unity. But then one night, Zero came. No one knows why he was there or what triggered the carnage. Maybe it was the scent of blood, the cries of a newborn child, or some distant memory tied to the place. Whatever it was, by dawn, the town was gone, buildings reduced to rubble, bodies littering the streets. And yet, in the ashes, they found something strange, a single message scrolled on a wall in what looked like dried blood: not safe, nowhere is safe. Was it a warning, a declaration, or the ramblings of a fractured mind? We may never know. One thing is clear, Gen X dynamics is at the heart of Zero's story. They created him, shaped him, and unleashed him upon the world. And now it seems he's become their biggest regret. I've intercepted fragments of old communications, panicked messages from Gen X scientists discussing how to contain him. They called him the anomaly, a variable they couldn't predict or control. Some even theorized that Zero's actions are part of a larger plan, one that's not entirely his own. What if the virus itself is using him as a tool, a way to spread its influence and evolve further? It's a chilling thought, survivors, but it's one we can't ignore. Every day, the reports grow more frequent. Zero has been spotted in the ruins of major cities, wandering through forests, even lingering near survivor camps. Some say he's searching for something or someone. Others believe he's drawn to places tied to his past, retracing the steps of a life he's long since lost. But here's the most unsettling part: wherever he goes, the infected seem to follow, not the mindless hordes, but the wardens and hunters. It's almost as if they're protecting him. If that's true, it means Zero isn't just a rogue anomaly, he's the center of something much larger, a dark web of connections stretching back to Gen X and forward into the unknown future. So where does that leave us? For now, all we can do is share what we know, piece together the fragments of this puzzle, and hope that somewhere, somehow, there's an answer. If you ever encounter him, survivors, remember this: he's not like the others. He might spare you, he might destroy you, or he might give you the one clue we need to end this nightmare. Keep your eyes open, keep your wits about you, and above all, keep surviving. This is Adam Cross, signing off, and as always, stay strong, stay safe, and don't stop fighting. Good evening, survivors. Tonight we delve into the dark underbelly of Gen X Dynamics, the same corporation that created the virus, the hunters, and of course, Subject Zero. We've already uncovered enough to make anyone question their faith in humanity, but the truth is, we've only scratched the surface. Rumors are swirling, fragments of whispered stories, strange sightings, and terrifying accounts from those who've dared to get too close to Gen X facilities. I've pieced together what I can, but I warn you, what I'm about to share will shake you, because the virus wasn't the end of Gen X's experiments, it was just the beginning. It seems that while the world was crumbling, Gen X wasn't just sitting back and watching their work unfold. No, they were doubling down, pushing the boundaries of science and morality even further in a desperate bid to control the chaos they unleashed. I've come across references to what they called the shadow projects, classified experiments that make the creation of the virus look like child's play. One of the most chilling details comes from an intercepted audio log. A frantic scientist can be heard whispering, "Project Harbinger is operational, but we've lost containment, they're evolving faster than expected." Harbinger, a word that implies doom, and from the reports I've gathered, that's exactly what it brought. The first sightings of what survivors now call the Harbingers came from a group scavenging near a Gen X research facility in the Rockies. They described grotesque hybrid creatures, far removed from the infected we know. One survivor claimed they had the size and strength of wardens, but moved with the speed and agility of hunters. Their skin was mottled, as if stitched together from multiple sources, he said, and their eyes glowed faintly in the dark, like embers smoldering in a dying fire. They didn't just chase us, one survivor said, they hunted us. It was like they were playing with us, testing us, herding us into a trap. I've never seen anything like it. Another report came from an abandoned safe zone near the Gulf Coast. Survivors found strange claw marks gouged into concrete walls and pools of a viscous black liquid that seemed to bubble and writhe on its own. They fled before seeing whatever had left those marks, but the message was clear: something new was out there, and it was worse than anything they'd faced before. The question that haunts me is this: why? Why would Gen X continue these experiments when the world was already falling apart? What were they hoping to achieve? Some speculate they were trying to create a new class of creatures, ones that could replace the hunters and wardens as ultimate weapons. Others believe they were experimenting on the virus itself, attempting to create a strain that could be controlled, weaponized, and sold to the highest bidder. And then there's a more sinister theory that Gen X wasn't trying to end the outbreak, they were trying to perfect it, to build a world where the infected weren't mindless monsters but tools they could command to reshape society in their image. One of the most disturbing accounts I've heard comes from a survivor named Leah. She was part of a small group that stumbled across a hidden Gen X facility deep in the Appalachian Mountains. At first, we thought it was abandoned, Leah told me. The place was falling apart, broken windows, rusted doors, overgrown with vines, but then we found the lower levels. What they found there was straight out of a nightmare: rows of glass tanks filled with murky fluid, each containing something barely human. Some of them looked like they were asleep, Leah said. Others, they were moving, twisting, and writhing like they were trying to get out. Leah's group didn't stick around to see what would happen if they did. They fled, but not before hearing a low, guttural growl echoing through the halls, a sound that seemed to follow them long after they'd left the facility behind. It's not just the creatures, survivors. There have been reports of strange phenomena near other Gen X sites, things that defy explanation. In the Midwest, survivors have spoken of areas where the infected behave differently, almost as if they're being controlled. They move in coordinated patterns, circling camps and cutting off escape routes, something we've never seen from the mindless hordes. And then there's the story of a survivor named Benny, who claimed he saw a light, a brilliant, pulsating glow emanating from the ruins of a Gen X lab in Nevada. I thought it was salvation, Benny said, but when I got closer, I realized it wasn't a light at all. It was something alive, something watching me. Benny didn't stick around to find out what it was, but the implications are terrifying. If Gen X was experimenting with more than just biology, if they were tampering with forces we don't understand, it could mean we're dealing with threats far beyond the scope of anything we've seen so far. Here's where it all ties back: survivors. The journal I found at the outpost hinted that Subject Zero wasn't just the first infected, he was also the first experiment. The notes mention something called Project Genesis, which seems to have been the precursor to the Shadow Projects. It was an attempt to create a perfect fusion of human and infected, a being that could harness the virus's power without succumbing to its mindlessness. Sound familiar? It should, because that's exactly what Subject Zero is. And if the Shadow Projects were building on that foundation, it means every harbinger, every strange phenomenon, every grotesque hybrid, it all started with him. So what does this mean for us? It means we can't let our guard down. The infected we've faced so far are just the tip of the iceberg. Gen X opened Pandora's box and now we're dealing with the fallout. If you're near a Gen X facility, get as far away as you can. The creatures born in those labs are unlike anything we've faced, and they're not bound by the same rules as the infected we know. And if you ever come across something you can't explain, something that feels wrong in ways you can't put into words, trust your instincts, run. We've survived this long by being smart, by staying vigilant, and by sticking together. Let's not lose that now. This is Adam Cross, signing off. Stay safe, survivors, and as always, keep fighting. This is Adam Cross, Survivors. Something unexpected just happened. You've listened to my broadcasts long enough to know that I don't get spooked easily, but this has me rattled. About an hour ago, while I was preparing tonight's broadcast, my frequency was hijacked. At first, I thought it was a technical glitch, static breaking in, the usual interference. But then I heard it, a voice clear as day. It wasn't one of our survivors, it wasn't one of us. The voice was male, calm, almost clinical, no panic, no fear, just cold precision. He said, "Adam Cross, I've been listening. I know what you're trying to do and I have the answers you're looking for, but you'll need to follow my instructions carefully if you want to hear them." No name, no hint of where he was broadcasting from, just those words and then silence. I tried to respond, but there was no answer, the signal cut out as suddenly as it came in. I know what you're thinking, survivors, it's a trap, right? A ploy by raiders or maybe even Gen X Dynamics themselves to lure me out. But here's the thing, the man knew too much. He referenced things I've never said on air, details about Subject Zero, about the hunters, even about the journal I found at the military outpost. How could he possibly know that unless he's been watching, or worse, unless he's been involved from the very beginning? Before the signal cut out, he left me with a set of coordinates, a location not far from here, an old radio relay station buried deep in the woods. He said I'd find the truth there, answers to questions I've been asking since this nightmare began, questions about the virus's origin, about Gen X Dynamics, about why the world fell apart so quickly. But he also warned me, come alone, if you bring anyone, you'll never hear from me again. Survivors, I'll admit it, this sounds like a death sentence. But if there's even the slightest chance that this man is telling the truth, can I afford not to go? There's another possibility, what if he's one of us? I've heard rumors, whispers really, about a group of scientists who tried to expose Gen X Dynamics before the outbreak, people who knew what was coming and tried to stop it, only to be silenced when everything went to hell. What if this man is one of them, someone who escaped, someone who's been hiding, waiting for the right moment to reach out? But then again, if that's true, why wait until now? Why contact me of all people? And why the secrecy? Or is it Gen X? Of course, there's the darker possibility, what if this isn't a survivor? What if this is Gen X? We know they've been monitoring survivors, we've seen their drones, their abandoned facilities still humming with power, their experiments still roaming the wastelands. What if this is their way of tying up loose ends, of silencing the one voice still speaking out against them? I've spent countless nights warning all of you to stay away from traps, to think twice before trusting anyone, and now here I am, debating whether to walk straight into one myself. I've heard stories from survivors who faced similar choices. A woman named Carla once told me about a mysterious voice on her radio promising supplies in exchange for a rendezvous. She went, hoping to find food for her starving children. Instead, she found an ambush, a gang of raiders waiting to strip her of everything she had. Carla escaped, but not without scars, both physical and emotional. Then there's the story of Marcus, a scavenger who stumbled across a functioning radio tower. He heard voices pleading for help, claiming they were trapped and surrounded by infected. Marcus risked his life to get to them, only to find the tower empty, no people, just a looping recording and a pack of hunters waiting in the shadows. Survivors, I've always said trust is a luxury we can't afford, and yet here I am, considering breaking that very rule. This is where I need you, survivors. You've been with me since the beginning, through every broadcast, every revelation, every nightmare. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.